like I think a lot of Formula One fans, we were hoping that come the Spanish Grand Prix, there would be this quantum shift in the way the wings are measured and enforced, the regulations, the tightened regulations, and that we would have more parity, therefore, on the racetrack. In reality, it seems to have gone the other way, and McLaren seemed to have an even bigger advantage than they had before. And interestingly, they were the only team that didn't actually submit any changes to their car for the Spanish Grand Prix anyway, which is a nice little PR thing.
Yes. I think let's deal with the FIA and what they did first. To introduce a regulation mid-season has to be either based on safety or unanimous acceptance. And the only way I would imagine, I don't know whether that actually applies in this case to the changed Articles 315, 4 and 5, but it is a rule change mid-season. I guess it wouldn't have been accepted by the top teams. It wouldn't have been unanimous if they thought it was going to hurt them in any way. So that was probably all the FIA could do to be seen to be doing something. Perhaps that deals with why the rule wasn't a game changer, because anything that looked like a game changer was not going to be unanimous. It's 5 millimeters less deflection in bending, and that's all it is. But just to go back one step, I think it's important to understand what the teams and indeed the drivers are trying to achieve. And if you take a Verstappen, a Schumacher, or a Senna, they are the drivers that can drive with what is basically an understeering car, which is stable, and they strive to get rid of the understeer, particularly at low speed, and make the car unstable, but they can deal with the instability. The understeer oversteer is regulated by the center of downforce. And let's talk about Verstappen. What he always wants is a really good turn-in, a really good front end, particularly at low speed. But what then happens is that at high speed, that turns into oversteer, and they don't mind, most other drivers do. And all the flexibility of rear wings to get rid of drag and hence increase top speed reduces the downforce at the rear and makes the instability worse. So what the teams are trying to do is build a front wing system, and it may go further downstream behind the front wing, but particularly the front wing, which reduces its lift coefficient, its basic characteristics, with speed. So as speed increases, the loads go up as the square of the speed. And what they want is it to detune the front wing. But the whole car's getting near the ground, the front wing's getting near the ground, and it's because the tip clearance to the ground is getting less, it's tending to produce more downforce, which is all the wrong direction. And of course, the person who can put the most and carry the most downforce on the front and deal with the resulting oversteer at high speed is going to have the fastest car. And I believe Schumacher did it, Senna did it, and Verstappen does it. Every time he complains of understeer, you know what's going on. So what I believe the teams, or certainly the very capable teams, have built is a front wing system that changes its shape such that the downforce, the CL of the wing, reduces with speed and load. And the FIA regulation doesn't really address that. What it does is, and the new regulation is reduce the deflection at the tip, the downward deflection at the tip, by 5 millimeters, which is about a third of the previously permitted deflection. And that's pure bending. They put a weight on the tip of the wing, and the tip of the wing bends, and they measure the gap to the ground. But what actually happens, because it's a swept wing, like on a modern jet aircraft, the wing not only bends, but the center of downforce is behind the mounting point on the nose, and therefore the wing twists. And that's well known on swept wing aircraft. And in fact, Boeing really cracked it. They could build a lightweight swept wing by mounting masses ahead of the wing, basically the engines on struts. And that counteracted some of the bending. And that's what gave Boeing the advantage in the commercial aerospace world. Long story, Comet had a problem and they were ahead of Boeing, but the Comet problem allowed Boeing to sort out how to build a lightweight swept wing. But that's a whole other story. The other thing that's important is with composites, carbon fiber particularly, you can lay the plies up in a wing that tunes the structural characteristics. You can build a wing that's very stiff in bending and quite flexible in torsion, or vice versa. But you can play with the deflection characteristics with load by laying up the plies in a careful way, because the plies are basically stiff in one direction. And so you can tune the structure. And for sure, the F1 teams are doing lots of that. Now, add to that, what happens when the wing loads up with speed is that the tip does deflect downwards, but also the wing twists along its length such that the end plate and the wingtip goes slightly nose up, tail down, which takes incidence out of the wing, which reduces the downforce. Now, the bit that I'm not 100% sure about, but suspect, comes from watching the on-car video that looks at the trailing edge of the wings on particularly the Red Bull car and the McLarens. And they are fascinating because as the car brakes heavily from high speed, the load comes off very fast and you can see how the wing moves and you can see the flap incidence increasing. The trailing edge goes up. And that is exactly what the drivers, the teams are trying to achieve. And it does it quite markedly and visibly. Now, the camera looks at the inboard end of the wing and the flap, where it joins the nose, but doesn't show you what's going on at the end plate. It's out of picture. And what I see at the nose end of the flap is that the flap can rotate on the mounting against the nose. It doesn't appear to be, the incidence of the flaps don't appear to be fixed at the nose end, which means they must be fixed at the end plate end, which is twisting, and is twisting in a way that flattens off the flaps with speed. So I think they've achieved very cleverly a front wing which you can put on however much you want for low speed to get rid of low speed understeer, and that doesn't give you a lot of high speed oversteer, because it washes out the front wing with speed and load. And I think it's very clever, and it's exactly what you want. But unfortunately, the FIA regulation, nowhere does it look at control of incidence of the wing or the flap, only the bending. And I think that is why nothing changed at the Spanish Grand Prix.
And Peter, do you think that McLaren, let's say McLaren had done a better job with that than anybody else, it would appear to be from the evidence? Do you think they've achieved that, as you say, from very sophisticated and clever use of the carbon system, the ply,
Yes.
the ply angles, the ply thicknesses?
Yes, I'm sure. It's known in the aircraft industry that as structures, primary structures of aircraft go more towards composites, that the layout of the plies are used to tune the structural deformations of wings, particularly swept wings. Yes, no, that is a well-known thing, and I'm quite sure they are well into that. As you sweep the wing, the center of downforce of the wing moves back behind the mounting point.
Yeah.
And therefore, if it's behind the mounting point, it must twist the mounting point, and it twists it nose up on a racing car, which is reducing downforce. So there's some very clever things going on in that wing structure.
So in a perfect world, putting aside unanimous agreement and everything else and politics, if F1 wanted to restore some sort of parity, the real way to do it would be to ban swept wings and go to a fixed straight wing. What would you call that wing?
Well, that would be just a straight wing, like a a small aircraft. Yes, it would. It would still deform, and you could still tune the wing, the structure, and even the aerodynamics of it to produce a torque in the wing which feathered it. The what it needs is much more complex load deflection tests.
The reason we have swept wings, I think, is cosmetic, was it not, originally for this car?
I don't know. I suspect it's to allow the wings to twist. It's the logical thing to do. It's what the car wants, it's what the drivers want. I think they've done it, and some people have perhaps done it better. So not quite sure why you'd want to stop it, because the wing is going to deflect whatever you do. You can't stop it deflecting in some way or other. So why not just let everybody do it and be the same things? That the innovators win for a bit and then it all catches up.
I think it was the Chinese Grand Prix when Charles Leclerc drove, I think, the whole race with a damaged or even no left front wing end plate on the Ferrari.
Yes.
There didn't seem to be any drop off in performance at all, which I suppose says something about the Ferrari's use of this system, right?
Well, possibly. And of course, Ferrari, the people who complained and asked for change.
Did they?
Well, I certainly, they were predicting the biggest change from this rule.
And have received the least advantage by the look of it.
And seem to have certainly not gained any advantage.
So how do we solve the problem, if indeed there is a problem? But let's assume the problem is McLaren have got the best car and it's going to be a boring world championship now. They're going to win every race by a margin of probably a lap. Not true at every circuit, of course, but assuming they have this big advantage and F1 needs to do something, what can they do now? Anything at all, do you think?
Well, I don't think they can change the rules any more without unanimous agreement, and I don't think they get that. So, and it's not a safety issue. In fact, it makes the cars safer by changing the characteristics to be more stable at high speed. I mean, there was a wonderful shot of Verstappen being unstable at high speed in the last few laps.
Yeah.
You see, he can cope with instability.
Yeah.
A lot of drivers can't. I remember with Lotus, there were drivers who said, I can't cope with high-speed oversteer. Don't let me have high-speed oversteer.
If in order to get the front end he wants, he's having to run that level of wing in order to be competitive with the McLaren being the baseline, why is it then that McLaren apparently have a better front wing? Sorry, McLaren have more grip at the front with the right amount of downforce at the front in allowing them to be able to look after their rear tire temperatures. Do you think it's a mechanical grip thing still? Does that still exist in Formula One, or is it all aerodynamic?
I don't know. I mean, it may be the overall aerodynamics of the McLaren are better than the Red Bull.
What do you mean by overall?
Well, I mean, lift drag ratio, so that they have a little bit more overall downforce. And then they can afford to come back with the center of pressure and end up with less oversteer and maybe less drag.